On this Thursday night, the second man behind the ArriveCAN app on the hot seat. His pleas of ignorance and the disbelief of MPs.
Come on, Mr. Anthony. Were you living under a rock for the last 3 years?
Complex case, how a 15-year legal battle finally ended for Canada's first judge to stand trial for murder. Profits running dry.
We've got an issue right now with 3 years of no income.
Will BC's multi-million-dollar aid package be enough to save its wineries? And third time, not completely lucky for the world's most powerful rocket.
It is rocket science after all.
How it made a giant leap before it was lost.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The ArriveCAN app, which cost Canadians close to $60 million to create, was under scrutiny again today in Ottawa. One of the co-owners of the private company given a lucrative contract to create the app said he had little to do with it, even though he's vice president and the chief security officer. Darren Anthony faced tough questions from MPs, including whether he ever read the damning Auditor General's report that said poor record-keeping made it impossible to determine the total cost to taxpayers.
And they've raised major red flags about your corporate practices of a company that you're one of the two principals, and you haven't even read the reports.
That's correct.
How can you dispute the findings of the reports if you haven't read them?
Do you intend to read the Auditor General's report after this meeting's over? No.
Anthony often pleaded ignorance, saying he didn't have answers to MPs' questions. Abigail Bimman has our top story tonight.
Call this meeting to order.
MPs of all stripes had trouble believing testimony from the other half of GC Strategy's Darren Anthony.
I have no knowledge of that.
Come on, Mr. Anthony. You read papers, you watch the news. Were you living under a rock for the last 3 years? Did you not experience the frustrations that millions of Canadians had at airports, border crossings? Come on. No one believes you. I certainly don't believe you.
Consulting the same lawyer as partner Christian Firth off camera, Anthony's strategy was to keep as much space as possible between him and the ArriveCAN app, even though he's one half of a two-man operation.
Literally everything to do with the ArriveCAN scam was flowed directly through Christian Firth. It had no DNA of you on it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I was not involved.
But Anthony didn't dispute that he took home more than $1 million in taxpayer money for it.
Can you explain to me how you're comfortable taking $1.25 million, but you're also very comfortable washing your hands off from anything that has to do with ArriveCAN?
I can only speak about my contracts.
In fact, he gave the impression he didn't know much about a lot of company operations.
Are the endorsements on your website fake, like the resumes that were provided in order to win government contracts?
I have no idea.
Most jaw-dropping, while he said the Auditor General's report on the costs of ArriveCAN was wrong.
Have you read the Auditor General's report?
I have not read it, no.
He has no plans to read it either. And if you need more evidence of why Anthony seemed unreliable, listen to how he described his business partner.
He's honest, trustworthy, hardworking man and a parent. I have no doubt that he's done nothing wrong. I'm confident all independent investigation will establish that.
Were you reading what you just said, sir, or were you speaking from the heart?
Speaking from the heart.
I don't even know what to say. This is so ridiculous.
Anthony couldn't tell the committee how many taxpayer dollars he's taken home since 2015, and while his partner promised to hand over documents and answers he didn't have Wednesday by 9 a.m. Thursday morning, when this meeting started, MPs learned he'd only turned over about 25%. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
A day after the U.S. voted to ban TikTok, Canada's industry minister has revealed a national security review of the popular video sharing app is already underway here. A review of TikTok's proposal to expand its business in Canada was ordered back in September. The industry minister says the law prevents the government from revealing details. On Wednesday, American lawmakers passed a law to ban TikTok in the U.S. if its Chinese parent company doesn't divest its U.S. assets within 6 months. The man charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder after a mass killing in an Ottawa suburb last week appeared in court today. The 19-year-old is accused of killing a mother, her 4 young children, along with a family friend, plus attempting to kill the children's father. Mackenzie Gray is outside the courthouse in Ottawa. Mackenzie.
Dawn, it was a quick phone appearance here at the Ottawa courthouse for the alleged mass murderer. Febrio De-Zoysa has been in custody since his arrest on March 6th and will stay there until at least the 28th, with both the Crown and his lawyers agreeing to adjourn his case without entering a plea or having a bail hearing.
I've met him over video and in person, yes.
And do you have from that meeting any sense of what may happen?
I can't comment on that, I'm so sorry.
That's the accused lawyer, who said De-Zoysa is in protective custody, but shared little other information with reporters, including if he plans to ask for a mental health assessment of his client.
By the nature of the case, it seems to me that we're going to be looking at some pretty significant psychiatric evaluations, and that's where the complexity is going to lie. It's going to take months and months before we even get to the point where we're moving into a trial situation.
De-Zoysa allegedly killed 6 people he lived with. A funeral for the victims now scheduled for Sunday in Ottawa, including 4 kids, the youngest 2 months old, along with their mother. The husband and father, Danushka Vikramasinghe, survived an alleged attack from De-Zoysa, who he met while studying at Algonquin College in Ottawa. A source close to Vikramasinghe says he was released from hospital today, still recovering from serious injuries to his face and hands from what police describe as a knife-like attack. The motive for De-Zoysa's alleged crimes still unknown.
They will interview the father, they will interview the suspect, they will interview neighbors, and they will also interview anybody else who may have information that will contribute to understanding the motive.
The Crown had to resubmit the charges today after making multiple spelling errors on the victims' names, the second major mistake authorities have made on the case, Donna, after the police chief originally said the murders were a mass shooting.
Okay, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thank you. Some Canadian diplomatic staff in Haiti have been airlifted out of the country to reduce Canada's footprint in the volatile country. Government officials say a number of embassy workers were taken by helicopter to neighboring Dominican Republic today. Other countries, such as the U.S., have already done so. Essential employees remain, including Canada's ambassador, and the embassy is still closed to the public. About 3,000 Canadians are still believed to be in Haiti. Global Affairs says there is no immediate plan to evacuate them. Israel's prime minister is vowing to forge ahead with his plan for a military invasion of Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip. And Israel claims it will move Palestinians towards what it calls humanitarian islands. There's no evidence any place like that actually exists in Gaza. About 1.5 million people are believed to be taking shelter in Rafah, and for them, finding food, shelter, and medicine is becoming next to impossible. Crystal Goomansingh now on the efforts to get more aid in, and the story of one Canadian who managed to deliver some by hand.
Young and old, all clamoring for something to eat. The UN now says 1/4 of Gaza's population is a step away from famine.
The people in Gaza need a break. They need aid. They need humanitarian and medical.
Riyam Al-Safadi is a Syrian Canadian who just a few days ago made the nearly impossible trip into Gaza as a part of a convoy with the WHO and other organizations delivering suitcases of medical aid to hospitals and clinics in the south.
The demand inside is huge. I have been to a couple of hospitals and they are in dire need. Even the medical staff are malnourished.
Al-Safadi helped deliver the basics donated from Canada and Egypt, including gauze, bandages, painkillers, and antibiotics. But he says it wasn't nearly enough.
Let it be clear, it's a drop in the bucket.
The situation is so dire, attempts are underway to bring in aid from the sea, with 200 tons of food approaching Gaza over the Mediterranean.
I'm very hopeful that we can be bringing millions and millions of meals daily. We may fail. Many things still may not allow us to be successful on this mission.
Jose Andres says the biggest failure would not be trying. While some aid is trucked in or dropped by planes, a second barge was loaded in Cyprus. Several American Army military vessels are also en route to Gaza with supplies and engineers. They're tasked to build a temporary roll-on, roll-off pier, which could end up looking something like this: an artificial floating harbor similar to those built in Normandy by Allied forces during the Second World War. But in this conflict, Chuck Schumer called the Israeli Prime Minister one of the major obstacles to peace.
Who has all too frequently bowed to the demands of extremists like Ministers Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and the settlers in the West Bank.
We cannot just parachute medical aid or aid from the sky, at the same time continue on supplying weapon and arm and bombs that will kill civilians.
Ignoring outside pressure, Benjamin Netanyahu met with soldiers, telling them they will keep going and enter Rafah, saying Hamas must be eliminated for Israel's security. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
Russia says Ukraine has fired more missiles at its border regions on the eve of Russia's presidential election. Russian officials say Ukraine targeted the Kursk region and fired at least 8 missiles at the Belgorod border region, killing 2 people and wounding 12 others. Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has killed or imprisoned his political opponents, will easily win a 5th term. His only opponents left are candidates carefully curated by the Kremlin who pose no real threat to his re-election. A long legal battle finally ends in Quebec. Coming up, what will happen to a former judge accused of killing his wife? After 15 years of legal battles, a retired Quebec City judge pleaded guilty today to manslaughter in the death of his wife. Jacques Delisle was originally convicted of first-degree murder after his wife's death in 2009. He spent nearly a decade in prison, always insisting he was innocent. Mike Armstrong explains.
The prosecution of Jacques Delisle is now over, basically because neither side wants to keep fighting. The 88-year-old retired judge walked back into a Quebec City courtroom, admitting his role in the death of his wife.
What the accused said today before the court, that he minimally handled the gun, loaded the gun, and gave it to his spouse, that he knows she was about to kill herself.
Delisle's wife died in their Quebec City home in 2009. Marie-Nicole Rainville was partially paralyzed and depressed. Delisle went out for a walk and returned to find Rainville with his pistol on her lap. She'd been shot in the head. In his trial for first-degree murder in 2012, Delisle never testified in his defense. The only time the jury heard his voice was this awkward 911 call.
Madame, j'arrive à la maison, ma conjointe s'est enlevée la vie. Qu'est-ce que je fais?
Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé?
Aucune idée, là.
Elle pas... Mais qu'est-ce qu'elle fait présentement, là?
Pardon?
Vous êtes où, premièrement?
Je suis chez moi.
Now, Delisle claimed his wife had gotten the weapon herself, but the jury had heard how sick Rainville had been, and even Delisle's own lawyer admits it was hard to believe.
He raised suspicions, I'm sure, with such a, what do you say in English, cock and bull story, something like that?
Delisle served 8 years and 310 days in prison. He was eventually released when the federal justice minister ruled that he believed mistakes had been made and ordered a new trial. Well, starting last December, the two sides went through mediation and agreed to a guilty plea of manslaughter.
This case, somewhere, sometime, has to come to an end.
Now, the plea doesn't mean the sides agree. Manslaughter was the middle ground, enough to get Delisle a one-day sentence as a formality and to end a decade and a half of legal wrangling. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Industry in limbo ahead. Why BC wineries are worried about their future. In California, a landslide in Los Angeles early Wednesday destroyed one home and left 2 others perched precariously on a hillside. It happened in Sherman Oaks, about 20 kilometers from downtown LA. No injuries have been reported. Since January, the LA area has received more than 40 centimeters of rain, nearly twice what it normally gets by this time of year. British Columbia's wine industry is suffering the effects of climate change. Extreme weather in the last few years has hurt vineyards. It's a problem plaguing grape growers in other parts of Canada too. BC's government has launched a $70 million plan to help BC's winemakers, but some say the losses are so severe, the survival of the industry is at stake. Neetu Garcha explains.
And get some light in there.
Some BC interior wineries are expecting catastrophic losses for their latest vintages.
Total mortality in a lot of places.
2 severe winter cold snaps in consecutive years have devastated vineyards across the region, leaving winemakers uncertain about the future of their wines and even their livelihoods.
We have to pivot, so rethinking our structure of how we're actually growing the vine, maybe.
Winery owner Suki Sikon says the situation is dire.
We're going to have to replant our whole vineyard, 100 acres over the next 2 years. So impact-wise, it's going to be very significant because in 2 years' time we won't have any wine to sell.
The full extent of the damage from the cold snap won't be confirmed until the spring, but like several winery owners in this region, Sikon predicts a more than 90% crop loss here at his vineyard in Coston, BC.
I think a lot of the smaller farmers and medium-sized farmers will not make it.
The BC government has responded to calls for help by announcing a new task force and replant program to support farmers affected by climate change.
This $70 million replanting program should hopefully go a long way to getting growers of fruits in our province back on their feet.
The news was welcomed by some at a gathering in Penticton, BC for wine industry leaders from across Canada. The president of a major Ontario-based business says it'll require rethinking, but the industry will survive.
If we lose 95% of a crop, we're going to have to replace that vintage with wine from another region. We'll need to make sure we label honestly and be totally transparent about what we're doing.
It's a $3.7 billion economic impact on the province, our industry. So it's not really just about the farmers and the winemakers. It's about the wine tourism and all that brings.
The BC government also announced plans to work with manufacturers to enhance visitor experiences at wineries and promote tourism. But Sikon says the commitments don't go far enough for businesses like his.
We've got an issue right now with 3 years of no income. That's $1.5 million that we have to put into the system in order to just operate. We don't know what's going to happen with staffing. Will our tasting room even survive?
As wine producers in Canada's biggest markets grow increasingly concerned about climate change, many will be watching how the region known as BC's wine country will weather this storm. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Coston, BC.
A hiker in Wales came across this, a steel monolith about 10 feet tall stuck in the ground on Hay Bluff, a hilltop on the border of Wales and England. The hiker says it looks like it was dropped there from space. He said there were no visible tracks around it. Similar structures have appeared before in England and Netherlands and Utah and then disappeared just as mysteriously. Astronomical milestone next. SpaceX reaches new heights and then loses another rocket.
She taught me that everyone has the potential to give something back, that everyone in need deserves a supporting hand in life.
Prince William spoke about his mother tonight at the 25th anniversary of the Diana Legacy Awards in London. The charity honors the memory of his mother, the late Princess Diana. 20 social activists were recognized for changing the world for the better. Diana advocated for many charities during her lifetime, including supporting the end of the use of landmines and eliminating the stigma of HIV and AIDS. William attended the event on his own. Prince Harry was expected to appear separately by video link from California. SpaceX launched the third test flight of its Starship rocket today, and it went farther and faster than the others. That part was perfect, but the rocket failed to land. The plan is for these rockets to be reusable, which means they have to land safely, not just take off. Elon Musk, who founded SpaceX 22 years ago today, has always done things differently, including exploring space. And as Mike Drolet reports, SpaceX still calls today's launch a phenomenal day.
SpaceX wasn't worried about the launch. They expected the most powerful rocket ever built to reach orbit. But after the first 2 test flights last year ended in massive explosions, the relief at SpaceX was palpable.
Making it this far is farther than we've gone on Flight 2.
Onboard cameras offered stunning views of the red-hot plasma field as the craft re-entered Earth's atmosphere before it was lost. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration called it a mishap. SpaceX and NASA, which never expected the Starship to survive, deemed it a success.
It is rocket science after all. It's hard to achieve, even if we've done it in different variations and different ways multiple times. Every time is a new challenge.
A lot is riding on SpaceX getting this right to achieve the goals set out by CEO Elon Musk. In the short term, he needs the Starship to deliver large satellites into orbit. But more importantly, he's partnered with NASA on the Artemis 3 mission, which will send astronauts to the moon as early as 2026. Former astronaut Mike Massimino says without private industry, space exploration is just too expensive.
I think one of the reasons we haven't been back to the moon in 50 years is because up till recently, NASA has been, and Canadian Space Agency and other government agencies, space agencies have been dependent on the taxpayers' dollars. There's only so much you can do with that.
I need a moment to pick my jaw up from the floor because these views are just stunning.
Musk has said he wants to see hundreds of uncrewed flights before astronauts set foot inside the Starship. After that, the moon, which for Musk is merely a stepping stone to Mars. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
That is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Lake Louise in Banff National Park. Thanks for watching. Jeff Semple will be at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I will see you again next week. Bye-bye.